Hey everyone, welcome to another video in this series about building a chat app in Flutter the right way. And in this video, we'll be looking at creating our view models, and we'll be using our view models to interface with our local data source, in this case our SQLite database on the mobile device itself. We'll be interfacing with the database using our view model so that we can write messages to the database, read messages from the database, and whenever we receive a message from the server, in this case RethinkDB, that message will be written to our local store, since we are not saving any message on the server, but all the chats and messages will be stored on the local device, just like WhatsApp. So let us get right into it, and what we want to do is to go into our lib folders, and we'll create another folder called ViewModels. And inside of our ViewModels folder, we want to create 3 view models. We want to create a base view model, a chats view model, chats plural, and this will represent the methods that will be used for the main list of chats. And then there is the chat view model, singular, which will be used for a single chat between 2 parties. So first we want to create our base view model, and I'll just call it base view model. And our base view model will be an abstract class, since we do not want others to create concrete implementations of this class, but rather to just extend it for the purposes of accessing the shared methods that will be here. So we are basically making our code dry, abiding by the dry principle, since there are some code here that will be repeated across both view models, and we do not want to rewrite the code. So we'll use this base class here to hold those repeated methods. So for our base class, we will accept our data store as the dependency that we'll use to interact with our local database. And I want to create a method here that is a add message method, and this method is responsible for adding a local message to our database or to our local storage. So in adding a message, when a new message comes in and I want to write that message to our local store, there's 2 things I want to do. First, I want to first check if this message is connected to an existing chat, or is it a part of an existing chat that is inside of our database. So what I want to do is to say if, and I'm gonna create a method if it is not an existing chat. So I'm gonna say existing chat, and I'm gonna get the chat ID from the message. So if it is not an existing chat, then what I want to do is to create a new chat before I add this message to the database. So I'll create a new chat, again pass in the chat ID, and then after the new chat is created, then I'll go ahead and access my data source and say add message and pass in my local message. So now let us go ahead and create that method, which is future bool is existing chat, and this will accept the chat ID. So we'll go ahead and we'll simply say return await, and we'll use our data source to say find chat, and we'll pass in the chat ID, and we'll say if this is not equal null. So not equal null meaning that the chat exists. And I'll go ahead and create the method also to create a new chat. Create new chat string chat ID, and we'll simply create a chat object here, passing in the chat ID. Then we'll call our data source and say add chat, and we'll go ahead and add our chat. And here this is a future, so I need to await there. Go ahead and import the necessary model, and there we have it. So here is checking that it is null. So I want to find my SQLite data source, and I want to make sure that for find chat, find a single chat, right? I want to make sure that I return null if no chat exists for that chat ID. So I'm just gonna say if list of chat maps, if it is empty, then return null, because no chat exists if it is empty. So let us go ahead and return null. Also for our find all chats, here I want to go ahead and order this I was gonna order this in descending order, but it's not necessary, so I'll keep it as it is. But for this also, what I want to do is if no chats exist, so if chats with latest message is empty, what I want to do is to return an empty array. So now we have our null check here, so we can check if we have an existing chat. So now that we have our base model, we can now go ahead and create our chats view model. So I'll say chats view model, and this chats view model will extend our base view model. So we need our constructor with the data source. So I'll go ahead and I'll say data source, this underscore data source, and then I'll just pass the data source along to the parent class or the superclass. So now that we have our chats view model, we have our data source injected, we can go ahead and create our methods that's specific to this view model in terms of the list of chats screen. So now on that screen, I want to receive messages. So I'm going to create a method void received message, so that when a message comes in from the server, that message will be passed to the view model using this method here. Then I'll construct a local message from this message that we have received from the server. And the chat ID here would be the user ID. So in this case, the message would contain the user ID, which is the from. So whomever the message is coming from. Then I would set the message status to delivered. And I'll also pass in the contents of that message. So now we have created our local message. I can say await, and I can call the add message method from the base class and pass in that local message, and it will add the message to the appropriate, to the correct chat, or to a new chat if this is the first time a chat is being established between this user. Also, inside of our base model, I want to annotate this method as protected. Now Dart do not support or do not have the protected access modifier like say C# or some other languages. Protect. Right, so Dart doesn't support the protected access modifier like some other languages, for example C#, even Swift, but it provides this annotation that you can annotate the method as protected, and it will give you some compiler message to show when you are using this method out of context. So the whole purpose of the protected is that this method cannot be accessed outside of the context of the base class and its children. So here, if I should create an instance of this module, this view model, and try to call the protected class, then it will give me a compiler warning. So here we have this our chats view model. That's the basis of it. Now we can go ahead and create our chat view model. And this is for when we open a single chat thread and having that communication within this thread. This will extend our base view model. Again, we need a constructor. We need our data source. So inside of our chat view model, we need our data source. Also gonna hold the chat ID. That be an empty string for now. And I'm just gonna hold a integer representation that displays other messages. So just like WhatsApp, where you are inside a chat, you are sending a message, but as chats come in that are not associated with this message, there is an indicator that says, for example, you have 2 or 3 new messages, so that you can go back and check those messages. So that's the purpose of that variable, that other messages variable. So now inside of our chat view model, I want a method that will give me the list of messages associated with this particular chat. So get messages for chat ID. So inside of this method, I'll go ahead and say messages is equal to await my data source, find messages for this chat. Then I want to check if the message is not empty, then I'm gonna set the chat ID here to the chat ID that is passed in from this method and return the list of messages. The next method I want is a method for the sent messages. So whenever I send a message, that message will be passed to this method so that it can be written to our local database. So again, I receive that message and I'm going to create a local message from it. Local message. The chat ID is 2. The chat ID will be message 2. That is the person to whom I'm sending this message. Pass the message contents, and also I want the receipt status to be sent. So that's my local messages, and I'm gonna check if the chat ID is not empty, meaning that this is an existing chat, it's not a new chat, it's not a new thread that I am creating. I'm coming I'm opening up a chat that has been going on for some time now. If it's an existing chat, what I want to do is to just add the message to the database without going any further. Local message. So I just want to add it and return. Otherwise, if it's the first time I'm creating this thread, then I want to set the chat ID here to the local message chat ID, and then await the add message method from the base class. And this method now will create the new chat object in the new chat record in the database, and also write the message to the database. So that's for the send, and again I want another one for received message, and this is similar to the method inside of the other view model. So I'm just gonna go ahead, I'm gonna copy this since I'm creating a local message here. I'm gonna change the message ID from to from, and this should be delivered. So now I'm gonna say if the local message, if the chat ID for this message is not equal to this present chat ID. So if I receive a message that is not a part of this chat while I'm in this chat, I'm gonna increment the other message. The other message is variable. Then go ahead and add that message to the database using the method from the base model. So now I have both methods in this chat view model. So inside of a chat, I'm able to send a message, I'm able to receive a message, and depending on whether or not the message that I receive is associated with this chat, I might increment the counter to display somewhere on the screen that you have received new messages outside of this chat, so you can go back just as it is in WhatsApp and check on those messages. So now we have our view models set up. We can go ahead and write test for our view models. So I'll go ahead, create a folder, view models, then chats, view model, tests. So for my test, I want to create a mock data source. Since I'm not using an actual implementation of my data source, I'm just going to create a mock for now that will serve the purposes. So there we have our mock. Our chats view model is our system under test. We'll have our mock data source, and then inside of our setup we'll go ahead and instantiate those objects. So now we'll instantiate our mock data source, instantiate our system under test, and pass in our mock data source. So there we have it. I'm going to go ahead also and create a message object that we'll be using in the test. So here we have our message object, and then for our first test, I want to go ahead and check that when we call the initial chats method or get the list of chats, it returns an empty list. So we'll go ahead and inside of our arrange section, we'll tell Mockito that whenever the find chats method is called, I want you to return an empty array. So now if I say expect await sut get chats, that should be empty. I did not define that method. And that's the beauty of writing tests. It shows you your error quick. Soon you can catch your errors. So that method is needed to return the list of chats that should be displayed on our first screen. Just gonna go ahead, await data source, find all chats. So now back to our test. There we have it. Go ahead, run that test, and there we have it. Our test is passing. So for the next test, I want to return the list of chats. I'm just going to copy this test, paste it here, and I'm just going to say returns list of chats. I'm going to create a chat. Return that chat. Then I am going to call list of chats. And for my expectation, I am going to say chats is not empty. Go ahead, run that. And there we have our test passing as it should. So I am just gonna go ahead and create the remaining tests and explain what is happening in them. So I have gone ahead and created 2 remaining tests, and the first one is that I want it to create a new chat when receiving a message for the first time. So I go ahead and configure my find chat method to return null. Then I call the received message, pass in the message, and I am verifying that the add chat method is called. Since this chat doesn't exist, therefore it should call this method to add a new chat or to create a new chat. So if I go ahead and run this, here we have a passing test. And for this one, it's adding a new message to the existing chat. Here I have a chat, and I am setting up my mock data source that whenever find chat is called, it returns that chat, which suggests that yes, a chat exists for this message, or this message is a part of an existing chat. So I called the received message method, pass in the message that is received, and verify never. So I'm verifying that the add chat method is never called, which is, it shouldn't be called since I am not creating a new chat, but I'm simply adding the message to an existing chat. And then I verify that the add message method is called once, which is to add the message to the database. So if I go ahead and run that, there we have our test passing. So we have all of our tests passing for our chats view model. And now we can go ahead and create another test file for our chat view model. This will be pretty similar to the chats view model test. So I am going to write the test and then explain to you guys what I have done. So I have gone ahead and set up our chat view model test and write the necessary tests. So this is quite familiar to what we have been doing so far. We have our chat view model, we have our mock data source, and we set those up in the setup method. We have a message object here that we'll be using. And as you can see, some of the tests returns. For example, this one, the initial messages should return empty list, and we basically override the find the message method from our mock data source to return an empty list. And in that case, when we say get messages for this chat ID, it should be empty. Again, similar to what we have done to return a list of messages from the database. So we have a chat, and we create a local message for that chat using the message object that we have created here. So now we override the find messages method inside of our mock data source to return the list of this particular local message that we have created. Then we call the get messages, pass in the chat ID. We expect the message should not be empty and that the chat ID should be 123. Next, for the other test, we say we are testing that it creates a new chat when sending the first message. So the thing is that we are not going to create a chat in the database unless a message is sent first, so that we do not have empty chats in the database. So for example, if the user opens a chat with another person but decided to go back without first sending a message, then we will not create a new chat from that. So the first message that is sent in that thread is what creates that chat inside of our local data source or our local database. So when our find chat method is called, we are going to return null. And so we are expecting that the add chat method will be called since we are adding a new chat, since it doesn't exist when the message is sent. Also, we want to test that we add a new sent message to the chat. Right? So whenever, basically what this is saying is that whenever we send a message, this particular message is added to this particular chat. So we create the chat, create a local message with the status delivered, and we say that when we find the message, we are going to return this list of message to suggest that this is an existing chat with all these messages. So we go ahead, we get message first, pass in the chat ID, then we send a message, and we are verifying that the add chat method is never called and that the add message method is called but once. So we are not adding a new chat, but we are adding a new message since this is an existing chat. So we're adding this new message to this chat whenever the message is sent, or whenever you send a message, it will be written to the database after it is sent to this server. And for this test, whenever we receive a message, we're gonna add it to the chat. So the previous test is whenever we send a message. Now this one is whenever we receive a message. And here the status should be sent. So whenever we receive a message, it's basically the same setup as the sent one. The only difference, we are calling the received method, and the expectation should be the same, that we should not be adding a new chat since it's an existing chat, and that we should be adding this message to this chat, writing it to the database for this particular chat. And the last test is that it creates a new chat when the message received is not a part of this chat. So this case is that we are inside a current chat and we're having a conversation with the person, but a new message comes in from someone else that is not a part of this chat, and it is not a part of an existing chat either. So in that case, we want to create a new chat altogether from that person and add it to the database. So as you can see, while we are engaged in this particular chat thread, and we are having a conversation, we can be receiving messages that is not associated with this particular chat, and therefore we have to determine what to do with those messages. And because we have to write those messages to the database, and we have to determine if it's a part of an existing chat or if we need to create a new chat, so that when we go back to the main screen with the list of chat, that new chat will be there for us to engage with in the conversation. So we receive the message here, we override our find messages method to return the list of messages. We override the find chat method to return null to say that this chat doesn't exist. We call our get messages method, then our received messages or received message method with the message. Then we are verifying that the add chat method is called once, since this is a new message for a chat that doesn't exist. Therefore, this chat should be added, and the message should be added also. And also, the other messages variable or count should be incremented, should now become 1, since we have received a message that is not associated with this particular chat. So let us go ahead and run all these tests and see if they are passing. And there we have all of our tests passing here. So there we have it. We have created our 2 view models. We have our chats view model, which represents the list of chats that will be displayed, the list of existing chats that will be displayed on the screen or front main screen. Then we have the chat view model, which represents the screen, a single chat thread, and the conversations that are happening there. And we have tested both view models to see that the scenarios that we're anticipating works. So that's it for this video, and in the next video we'll be looking at creating our block and this handle dealing with states, the different states that will be happening in our system or in our app. So thank you guys for checking out this video. Thank you for continuing to watch and to tuning in. I hope that you'll find the series interesting and that you will continue to learn as we grow together as Flutter developers. Thank you again, and see you in the next video.